Good morning, and we do apologize for the slight delay. It's just after 10 past 9, but I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to this Hydrogen Economy Indaba, episode 2 of a series of 4 episodes. The theme for today's episode is ownership and participation. Welcome to our speakers for today. Our lineup of speakers covers a broad range of areas. A very special welcome to our two deputy ministers who are also our keynote speakers today, namely Deputy Minister Fikile Majola of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition and Deputy Minister Pinky Kekana of the Presidency. Deputy Minister Kekana and Majola, it's a privilege to have both of you speak today and looking forward to your talk. To set the tone today, I would like to give you an overview of how ownership and participation forms a key enabler in the development of this new hydrogen industry. But firstly, some background. You may be aware that the IDC was mandated by Minister Ibrahim Patel to be the commercialization champion of the hydrogen industry. Minister Patel also set up a green hydrogen panel to develop the national commercialization strategy, which will be finalized within the next 2 months. The approach that you see on screen is what I like to call the 4P approach. You've heard of the triple P. This is the quadruple P, namely people, partnerships, policy, and projects. So with people, starting off with people, we want a hydrogen economy for all, not just the elite and large corporations. This new hydrogen economy needs to address people's needs for jobs, skills development. Our people need energy security to live their day-to-day lives. We need economic growth. Health and safety issues need to be addressed. And we need a future that is pollution-free for our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren to live in. This is what a hydrogen future promises for us all. Next, strategic partnerships is a key success factor. If we try to do this alone or work in silos in a disjointed way, we will go nowhere. We need to work together for South Africa Inc. Such key partnerships will include partnerships on financing, technical, manufacturing, project development partnerships also. You may remember in the REAP projects, the Renewable Energy Independent Power Purchase projects, community consortiums were also funded to enable the communities to take up ownership in projects. We should do something similar for the hydrogen economy. Then we go on to policy. We can start this new industry, but if we don't get the right policy in place, we won't go far. Here we need to look at things like carbon pricing, tax incentives, import duties, export market incentives, example guarantees of origin, and the benefits that our strategic economic zones or SEZs provide. And finally, projects. And projects is what will get this new industry physically up and running. Projects is what will create jobs. Now, projects will include identification, development, and implementation of catalytic hydrogen projects. We want to utilize these pilot projects as industry debottlenecking vehicles. We should look at projects along the value chain from raw materials, renewable energy production of hydrogen, mobility applications, synthetic aviation fuel also. Project developments gives us the opportunity to do things correctly from the start by setting up businesses that will include previously disadvantaged from an ownership and participation perspective. So with that background, I would like to introduce you to our first keynote speaker for the day. But before doing that, some housekeeping. I would like to request that audience members please submit questions that you may have during the course of this webinar on the chat. We will be having a look at the chat, and during the Q&A sessions, we will try and address as many questions as we can, time permitting. Now I have the great pleasure of introducing our first keynote speaker, Deputy Minister Fikile Majola. Deputy Minister Majola currently serves as the Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry and Competition in the Republic of South Africa, following his appointment on 28 May 2019. He is a member of the 6th Parliament as a representative of the African National Congress. He has also served as a member of the 5th Parliament, and during his period served as the chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Energy until 2019. He actively participated in many structures in the liberation movement during apartheid. Deputy Minister Majola became the General Secretary of NEHAWU in 1988 and served in this capacity until 2014 and remained the longest serving General Secretary in the history of the Union. Deputy Minister Majola has also served as a Central Executive Committee member of COSATU from 1995 until 2014. Deputy Minister Majola obtained his honors in public administration from the University of Western Cape. Deputy Minister, it gives me very great pleasure to hand over to you to start our webinar this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Deputy Minister Pinky Kekana, Dr. Stefan Libeng, Mr. William Mabapa of the National Union of Mine Workers, Mr. Kolas Tole, Program Director of the VAL Special Economic Zone, international academic and industry experts, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. On behalf of the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, the DTIC, it's a great pleasure to provide a keynote address at this very important event. I believe that with collaboration between the relevant social partners, it is possible to convene this Indaba annually to provide guidance and support to the country's efforts to become one of the leading countries in the hydrogen economy. Global momentum is growing across the hydrogen industry, with few sectors likely to remain untouched by this upcoming energy revolution. At the beginning of 2020, the global hydrogen project pipeline across gray, blue, and green projects stood at $95 billion. All over the world, interest in hydrogen as a vector for clean energy is growing, as industries and governments investigate and implement national decarbonization strategies. As of the beginning of this year, about 18 countries, accounting for over 70% of global gross domestic product, have completed the development of hydrogen strategies or are in the process of doing so. With the rapid growth in renewable electricity and falling costs of wind and solar, the opportunity to produce zero carbon hydrogen has caught the attention of global energy players. With the world increasingly turning towards countries that have optimal renewable energy resources to provide the clean energy for the future, South Africa is in an extraordinary position to revolutionize its own economy and support green hydrogen to the world. Program Director, although prompted by climate change, the global energy transition is now driven by technology innovation and commercial returns. Global energy models are shifting from the historic reliance on extraction and processing of fossil fuels to future models based on converting free and abundant natural resources. The need for transportable and tradable green energy molecules is a critical part of satisfying future global energy demand, decarbonizing hard to abate industries and driving the growth of a new global energy market for green hydrogen. Indeed, it is becoming clearer that the hydrogen economy is a potential game changer for the whole world. South Africa is well positioned to capitalize on this rapidly developing global hydrogen economy. Our country has abundant renewable energy resources, providing a significant opportunity to be a player in the global green hydrogen energy market, and thus playing a leading role in the global energy towards a net carbon zero future. The development of South Africa's hydrogen economy is also a significant opportunity to create domestic growth and development, improve energy security, and transition to a low carbon economy and society. Consequently, government has appointed a presidential climate commission to oversee a just transition of South Africa's economy to lower emissions. This is in line with our nationally determined contribution, NDC, under the Paris Climate Change Agreement goal of a 1.5 degree Celsius warming scenario. In response to South Africa's climate change goals and the economic development opportunities afforded by the green hydrogen economy, Cabinet recently approved a Hydrogen Society Roadmap for South Africa. The Hydrogen Society Roadmap provides a high-level framework for the development of a domestic hydrogen economy. To give effect to some of the recommendations made by the Hydrogen Society Roadmap, as already indicated by the Program Director, Minister Ibrahim Patel established a South African Green Hydrogen Panel in June 2021. The panel will develop a green hydrogen commercialization strategy that will outline the commercial opportunity and development approach for a viable green hydrogen industrial sector able to service both export as well as domestic demand. Establishing a new long-term industrial cluster and capability will, however, require bold policy and government support at a time when South Africa is battling low economic growth and fiscal weakness. Securing international support and financing through bilateral and commercial arrangements will be key to South Africa securing an early mover market position. Developing a domestic hydrogen economy also gives effect to government strategic platinum group metals beneficiation objectives. South Africa's abundance of PGMs, a key ingredient for the hydrogen economy, puts the country in a strong position to produce green hydrogen while optimizing key value chains within South Africa's mining sector. With more than 80% of the world's platinum reserves and home to the largest platinum mining companies in the world, our platinum resource advantage should be exploited to position South Africa as a significant global player in the global green hydrogen economy. The biggest enabler for the fuel cell market will be the global rollout and application of fuel cells in the transport and mobility sector. Electric vehicles powered by hydrogen fuel cells offers many benefits given its technology attributes, especially for long distance and heavy vehicle transport, such as buses and trucks. Transportation initiatives with major fleet owners and OEMs offer an opportunity for the country to demonstrate and introduce green transport solutions using fuel cell electric vehicles for the domestic and export market. In this regard, the DTIC's Green Transport Strategy 2018-2050 is designed to facilitate South Africa's transition to eco-mobility. It embraces a multitude of transport greening fuels and technologies, including hydrogen fuel cells. In addition, fuel cell mining equipment and trucks provide health and safety benefits compared to diesel and electric options in underground mining applications. Anglo-American is investing in renewable hydrogen production technology at its mines and the development of hydrogen-powered fuel cell mine haul trucks, earmarked to be the world's largest to run on hydrogen. In collaboration with the private sector, a feasibility study is underway as the first phase of the Platinum Valley Initiative, which will drive the planning, design, construction, and commissioning of projects related to the development of a hydrogen valley. Program Director, the study will support plans to develop a hydrogen valley linking the Northern Cape, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal. The Hydrogen Valley is one of the first projects that will be implemented to support the Platinum Valley Initiative. SMMEs will be supported to take advantage of opportunities in the just transition to a green economy. South Africa's Hydrogen Valley will identify concrete project opportunities for kickstarting hydrogen activities in promising hubs. The aim is to boost economic growth and job creation, drive the development of new industries, increase value add to the country's platinum reserves, and reduce the country's carbon footprint. A key challenge for the widespread adoption of hydrogen are, however, its high development costs. This challenge requires a well-coordinated approach to provide immediate solutions. Global uptake, driven by greenhouse gas commitments and growing green finance options, will assist in unlocking the required volumes and economies of scale necessary to make green hydrogen economically viable. Domestically, the DTIC is currently reviewing its critical infrastructure program, the CIP, so that it may assist in alleviating some of the infrastructure costs associated with hydrogen production, fueling, and transport facilities. The Special Economic Zones program, driven by the DTIC, also offers incentive support for investment and exports. The national government, through the DTIC, and the Gauteng provincial government are working together at the moment to oversee the designation of the Vaal Special Economic Zone and the development of a smart city. This is part of the primary objective of the Gauteng provincial government to build a city region that is seamlessly integrated, economically inclusive, and globally competitive. The strategy and business case for the Vaal SEZ currently being finalized is based on 6 pillars. One of these pillars is focused on a green energy-fueled reindustrialization of the Vaal region, transforming this industrial basin into the country's preeminent hub for low-carbon manufacturing and renewable energy production. This will see the establishment of a hydrogen valley innovation hub through government partnership with the private sector. In this regard, we welcome the interest shown by Mitochondria Energy Systems Pty Ltd to locate their Project Phoenix in the Val SEZ once it is promulgated. The project promises to be among the very largest facilities for the production of fuel cells for stationary applications in the world. The Val SEZ and the Val City, this Val Smart City holds out great prospects for our international partners to explore available opportunities and invest in the region through the green industries and technology. The Springs Fuel Cell Hub, linked to the Gauteng Industrial Development Zone, has been approved with a focus to build on current partnerships, skills capacity, and existing support infrastructure for both fuel cell manufacturing and deployment. The Springs location offers access to PGMs from surrounding refineries, existing hydrogen pipelines, metal and engineering suppliers, as well as established transport and logistics services. To support a focused effort on the opportunities in green hydrogen, the DTIC has instructed our entity, the Industrial Development Corporation, to lead the commercialization of green hydrogen efforts, working with the Department of Science and Innovation. The IDC will focus on coordinating the efforts in developing the hydrogen economy and identifying investment opportunities to assist with the immediate implementation of pilot projects. Furthermore, the IDC has been given the mandate to actively form partnerships with the private sector in funding opportunities across the green hydrogen value chain. The IDC funds project development work, project finance, and direct deal transactions in the hydrogen economy. This funding covers all areas of the hydrogen value chain, including raw materials, renewable energy generation, hydrogen production, storage, distribution, equipment and component localization, and various applications such as synthetic aviation fuel, ammonia, hydrogen vehicles, green steel, and so on. IDC project development funding covers co-funding and co-development together with other strategic equity partners to fund pre-feasibility and feasibility studies, which can include the funding of pilot projects. Additionally, the IDC manages several green bonds and is developing a sustainable bond framework which will contain funding instruments based on sustainability criteria. It is imperative that we promote public-private sector linkages that will be critical to the development of the entire green hydrogen value chain. These collaborative efforts are expected to accelerate the development of a sustainable and inclusive local green hydrogen economy. As articulated earlier, government is committed to working with all stakeholders to create an advanced and enabling environment for the development of this new industry as part of our reindustrialization strategy and to become an exporter of cost-effective green hydrogen. Together with our partners, we will collaborate to support the development of the hydrogen economy and fuel cell manufacturing capabilities. As countries reconstruct their economies destroyed by COVID-19, there's a realization that renewable technologies will play a critical role. Throughout the world, governments are developing hydrogen strategies to establish leading positions in the emerging market. Aligned to South Africa's recovery and reconstruction plan, the hydrogen economy transition offers long-term job investment and new industry opportunities along the renewable energy value chain. As the DTIC, working together with other sister departments, we will continue to support the commercialization of green hydrogen through strategic localization, reindustrialization, and transformation. There are a number of commercialization lanes for South Africa to drive industrialization of green hydrogen by meeting demand for power fuels. Among those options is to produce large volumes of green hydrogen power fuels for export to markets across the globe. We will also continue to explore policies and regulations which progressively promote the decarbonization of South Africa's hard-to-abate sectors. We must strive to leverage our resources to grow this exciting industry and the economy of South Africa. Ladies and gentlemen, South Africa is the industrial and technological hub of the regional and continental economy. Informed of our strategic economic position within the continent, it is in our interest to harness the opportunities of the green hydrogen. The hydrogen economy presents an opportunity for the African continent to achieve the imperative of reducing carbon emissions, shifting to clean and renewable energy, and driving industrialization. As I conclude, South Africa, to succeed, we need to work together with our friends throughout the world, with whom we share the common aspirations to defeat poverty and underdevelopment, not only in South Africa, but in the African continent. I wish this hydrogen economy Indaba successful discussions, and I am confident that the outcome of this gathering will contribute in further advancing the green industries in our country. I thank you very much, Program Director.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister, for those very energizing words to start the day. You made a lot of important points there, specifically the fact that to succeed in this hydrogen economy, we need bold policy and government support, as you mentioned. Thanks also for mentioning that we need to secure international support as a key to becoming an early mover in this industry. You mentioned the application of fuel cell in mobility, which is very important in heavy duty vehicles as a means of having a significant impact in decarbonization. And this, as you mentioned, is also linked to the DTIC's green hydrogen, green transport strategy also. And finally, Minister, thanks also, Deputy Minister, for mentioning the role of the SEZs. And you mentioned the Springs and the Vaal SEZs. These SEZs is what give international investors incentives to come into the country, and we're very much looking forward. Thanks for your update on the Vaal SEZ. We're very much looking forward to developing that as one of those important hydrogen hubs for the country, especially considering its close proximity to many large industries there. And I'm sure there's a lot of synergies that's going to be established between the hydrogen economy coming up there and large industries. And that's, I think, a very key point that you brought up, Deputy Minister. So once again, thank you, Deputy Minister. Those were very energizing and inspiring words to start our day. And with that, I would like to now introduce Deputy Minister Pinky Kekana. I have the honor of introducing our second keynote speaker, which is Deputy Minister Pinky Kekana. Ms. Pinky Kekana was appointed as Deputy Minister in the Presidency on the 5th of August, 2021. Previously, Ms. Kekana held the position of Deputy Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies from February 2018 to August 2021. As someone who grew up in the rural South Africa, she recognized the vital role and importance of bridging the digital divide between people living and working in the remote areas and regional areas of the country and those in metropolitan areas. Ms. Kekana was elected to the African National Congress Women's League National Executive Committee and was subsequently deployed to the Secretary General of the Pan-African Women's Organization, where she is committed to ensuring all African women, particularly girl children, are empowered. With that very inspiring background, I hand over to you, Deputy Minister Kekana. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mahandra, our moderator. Let me take this opportunity to recognize Deputy Minister in the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, Mr. Fikile Majola, the General Secretary of NUM, Mr. William Mabapa. Let me recognize Conjunta GmbH, Dr. Stefan Liebing, representatives from the National Society of Black Engineers, Mr. Mdu Mlaba, the representative from the African Industrialist Association, Mr. Mashudu Ramano, esteemed panelists, the CEO of the VAL Special Economic Zone, Mr. Kolas Tole, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The use of clean hydrogen can help address the toughest threat of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, but only if net zero emission goals and policies are set by governments across the world, including South Africa. The falling cost of making hydrogen from wind and solar power, or the hybrid technology, offers a promising solution in cutting emissions in some of the most fossil fuel dependent sectors of the economy, such as steel, heavy-duty vehicles, shipping and cement, all of which are major sectors in South Africa and Africa. There is much debate about the role of green hydrogen as a key energy vector in a decarbonized world. But in South Africa, the discussion thus far has been focused on what the opportunities for the country might be to become a leading player, considering its unique position as the world's largest producer of PGMs and its subsequent huge potential for renewable energy production. In this week's newsletter, President Cyril Ramaphosa wrote, I quote, "It's no exaggeration to say that the world is facing a climate crisis of unprecedented proportions. The latest report from the world's leading climate scientists has warned that the pace of global warming is rapidly increasing, and sub-Saharan Africa has been experiencing temperature increases well above the global average. Climate change presents serious health, environmental and economic risks for our country. These risks will have increasingly damaging effects on human health, water availability, food production, infrastructure, and migration." Close quote. The devastating impact of climate change is already being felt in South Africa. One just needs to think of the water and energy crisis facing our country on a daily basis due to unprecedented droughts and flooding. Also, as the world becomes more competitive in respect of a zero net carbon emission status, South Africa's manufacturing sector, that is driven by coal-generated electricity, compromises us in respect of global trade barriers and consumer behavior that is quite rightly being steered away from carbonization. In undertaking widespread consultation, there is a call from social partners for an ambitious, realistic, and most importantly, impartial transition. Our migration to a decarbonized economy is dependent on crafting an objective transition that will not only meet social obligations to our people, but also enable our economy to grow immensely. I wish I could say it is going to be easy. There are serious sectors of the economy that will be severely impacted by the transition process. Agriculture, tourism, mining, energy, transport, manufacturing, and the biodiversity economy will all be massively impacted. From a presidency perspective, a transition plan must negate human capital impact as much as possible. The transition process needs to be fully inclusive, involving industry and organized labor in reskilling and upskilling, creating employment, and providing support to ensure that our people are the major beneficiaries of a greener future shift. As we face the 5th full day of stage 2 load shedding this week, our electricity sector, which contributes 41% of South Africa's greenhouse gas emissions, ideally should be prioritized in the decarbonized transition so that there is beneficial impact across the economy. The President advised that we'll be decommissioning and repurposing coal-fired power stations and investing in new low-carbon generation capacity, such as renewables. His Excellency further advised that we'll also pursue green industrialization, such as manufacturing using green technology and a shift to the production of electric vehicles. While these are enormous challenges, we must not be blind to the opportunities that exist. South Africa has abundant resources and highly skilled people to unlock prospects for investment in building a brand new economy in green hydrogen. The scientists tell me that the potential of green hydrogen is in its ability to decarbonize sectors that are traditionally difficult to decarbonize through renewable energy and direct electrification. These sectors include aviation, maritime, heavy-duty transport on the mobility side, and steel, cement and ammonia production on the industry side, creating opportunity for solutions and economic activities. Currently, the world market for hydrogen economy is approximately 17 million tonnes per annum, with the vast majority, or approximately 96%, being grey hydrogen. Sasol is a major player in the world hydrogen market, producing approximately 2.3 million tonnes of grey hydrogen per annum for domestic use. In the pursuance of solutions, job creation, economic participation, and financial inclusion is critical for us. Eskom will soon be commissioning a pilot project at the Komati Power Station, which will be shutting down the very last coal-fired unit in 2022, thereby producing power through renewable energy. Komati serves as the case study to understand the dynamics of such an undertaking of transition from coal dependency could be achieved. The recently updated and approved nationally determined contribution sets out the emissions targets toward net zero carbon emissions by 2050, giving us a target range for emissions, restricting global warming to less than 2 degrees Celsius at the top of the range and the bottom of the range compatible with the goal of restricting warming to less than 1.5 degrees Celsius. Our success fully depends on the support we get for the transition from the developed economies and for them to deliver on their promises for assistance. This is not about perpetuating further aid and dependency, but rather about a global agenda for the biggest polluters to take responsibility for this climate change crisis, as it is now the developing countries who are the most affected. Although South Africa has a long history of researching green hydrogen for the decarbonization of transport, green hydrogen's potential is relatively less explored. We also lag behind Chile, Australia, North Africa, and Middle East in announcing our intention and appetite to be a major green hydrogen production hub. And this must change now. Over the past 9 months, the Investment and Infrastructure Office in the Presidency has been working with the Northern Cape and Gauteng provincial governments to develop catalytic green hydrogen projects. And our Deputy Minister has covered on some of these things. And these will underpin provincial green hydrogen strategies, with the Northern Cape being the production hub and Gauteng being the domestic demand hub. This project, together with the Department of Science and Innovation's Hydrogen Society Roadmap for South Africa and the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition's Green Hydrogen Commercialization Strategy, will be the foundation of a national green hydrogen strategy. We have an opportunity to empower a new generation of Black industrialists, driving a green hydrogen economy, and half of them must be women. The 2020-2030 decade of African women's economic and financial inclusion, and the Women's Assembly launched by the President recently, is an indication of the Presidency's commitment to the inclusion of women and youth in the economic agenda of South Africa. And this must include the burgeoning green hydrogen economy. As I conclude, as the whole world anticipates the COP26 Climate Summit, there is a window of opportunity to create awareness about the true state of climate crisis and mobilize additional climate funding for South Africa's green future to be realized. Program Director, I want to wish this hydrogen economy in Indaba a success, and that we'll emerge with a program of action that will take South Africa forward and grow our economy. I thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Kekana, for those encouraging words. And you indeed brought about many important points, starting off with the ability of hydrogen to decarbonize more sectors than just renewable energy alone. And that's very important for our country, as we do have large industries that has the potential to be decarbonized by green hydrogen. You made an important point about consumer behavior that is being steered away from carbonization globally. And I think that also impacts South Africa. I like what you said about we need to meet social obligations and economic growth at the same time. The just energy transition that you mentioned, and the fact that industry and organized labor needs to be responsible for reskilling and upskilling. You also reminded us that there is a global commercialization race happening right now, and South Africa needs to act quickly to take its place in this race. And thanks for concluding about the fact that this gives us an opportunity to empower a new generation of Black industrialists, as you mentioned, and very importantly, half of them needs to be women. And with those inspiring words, Minister Kekana, I thank you once again. And we can now move into the question and answer session for our two deputy ministers. So we have the first question for Deputy Minister Majola. And the question relates to ownership challenges of the hydrogen economy value chain. How competition or competitiveness is impacting on Black economic ownership. So, Mr. Majola, can you start with that, please? Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. Firstly, let me start off with something very important that you highlighted from what Deputy Minister Kekana said with regard to the need for South Africa to position itself in the development of this new industry to ensure that we can further deepen our program of building Black industrialists, and especially women and youth. We needed this sector, as I said already. The main inhibitors are going to be costs. So we're going to need a lot of government support, working together for private sector partners and our international partners in building the sector. So we need to ensure that we, as is the case in all of our sectors across the economy, that we can build competitive industries. What we're doing now is we drive deeper localization in South Africa. We recognize that competition with especially developed countries is very stiff. So the question of ensuring that there's we facilitate competitiveness as we broaden domestic production is going to be very important for South Africa in all the sectors, including the current sectors of the economy, but also in the emerging sectors of the economy. So in particular, Black industrialists, who in particular should be women and youth, will not succeed and South Africa as a whole on the competitive edge if there is not going to be a lot of government enabling policy and financial support. So for the question that has just been raised, I think that the issue of competitiveness is one of the biggest challenges facing South Africa in our localization and industrialization drive. So I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Deputy Minister Majola, for that response. So Deputy Minister Kekana, I have the next question for you. And this relates to the role of the presidency in coordinating other government departments. So we need a number of government entities to provide different kind of policy instruments and incentives or support in general, government support for this new industry. For example, Department of Transport has a role to play in mobility, DTIC, DMRE on energy generation. So I would like to just understand to what extent can the presidency and especially play a role to unite the different government departments to align on enabling this hydrogen economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I think you have also seen the infrastructure unit that is being led by Dr. Ramokgopa, which is also driving this initiative. In the infrastructure summit that took place a week or so ago, it's an indication that coordination will be led from the presidency to make sure that enabling legislation, frameworks that will be needed, all other impediments are dealt with with agility, so that as a country we're able to respond to some of these things. So the president himself also wants to see this taking off ground, because to us it's a catalytic project, and it can bring or become a game changer, having looked at how load shedding and the unavailability of electricity has been in a way affecting the economic growth and activities in South Africa.
Thank you for that response, Deputy Minister. And it is actually very encouraging that we have support right from the president himself for this economy. Thank you. Deputy Minister Majola, the next question relates to the role of DTIC, specifically with regards to localization. So as an example, in the REAP program, DTIC played a very critical role to enhance the use of local components and equipment. To what extent can we replicate that for the hydrogen economy? For example, are we able to look at designation of components, import tariffs, and what else to encourage use of local content? Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much, moderator. Let me say that, firstly, during this period, one of the DTIC and the whole of government's major imperatives is to drive deeper localization, so that we can shift the balance of trade in favor of South Africa. For this localization to take place, would need to ensure that there is more support going to our domestic producers. I've already said that we're looking at the DTIC's infrastructure, critical infrastructure grant, to align it to ensure that it can provide support to this emerging industry. So it is something that the DTIC will be working on, and I think it is something that we've got to complete quite fast to ensure that we can give industry the confidence that as soon as they enter into this new industry, they will be able to get support from the DTIC. We're very much interested in ensuring that we can reduce our import bill by about 20% in the next coming years. So that's a very big challenge that is going to depend on our ability to ensure that we can build competitive industries as we deepen localization. So with specific regard to the hydrogen economy, it is something that in the DTIC we'll be working on to ensure, to see how we reconfigure our critical infrastructure grant, including the grant that deals with support for technology to ensure that I know that we're now in the process of finalizing the guidelines with regard to the technology and the human resources guidelines support to industry. So we will also ensure that as we finalize that it can also focus specifically on the emerging hydrogen economy.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. And that is quite important because we are aware that there are already local companies who are setting up component manufacturing facilities, and they're going to need the support. So that's very important. Thank you for that feedback. So I think the next question we have can go to both Deputy Ministers coming from the audience, and it says, what kind of SMME support can we look forward to in the hydrogen economy? So, Deputy Minister, either of you are welcome to take this one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mahandra. I think there are lessons learned during the process of IPPs, and I think through this project we need to improve on South African-based companies' participation. And what is important is to make sure that our SMMEs participate in the whole life cycle of the project. And the funding must also deal with that. From the acquisition of land to equity ownership, to operation and maintenance, to asset management, and even ensuring that there's local skills development capacity of South Africans, so that we know in that whole life cycle, our SMMEs are in that process. We have seen in the IPPs, I mean, South African-based companies participated, but even up to now, we cannot proudly say our SMMEs are benefiting. So we have to, all those who are participating, and this Indaba must also make sure that the entire value chain or the life cycle of this project, South African-based companies participate. And as I said, women and young people can't be left out in this whole process. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
I may add, thanks very much, DM. I may just add that, firstly, let me say that I think the presidency, of course, our lead department will be small business development with regard to addressing the question that's been raised. But it is critically important that the presidency should play a leading role in coordinating the efforts to support emerging businesses, SMMEs in this particular industry, so that they can be coordinated efforts across the various departments, small business development, the DTIC, and others. Because Mr. Mashudu Raman was telling me the other day when we were having a small conversation about the potential this industry has. So he was giving me an example. So he gives me an example of the size of the mining industry that has been the backbone of South Africa's economy for many years. And then he says there's a real potential that this hydrogen industry, green hydrogen industry, will become the mining industry of the future as a backbone of the economy. So if that's going to be the case, we need to ensure that very early on, we can ensure that we're building an inclusive industry by ensuring that small participants, emerging participants, especially Black participants, women and youth, are embedded in the process. So I think that the presidency can play a very key role as a leader in coordinating that effort to ensure that we give support to small, medium and micro enterprises. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. And thanks also, Deputy Minister Kekana, for emphasizing the role of the value chain. You know, this is a new industry and we do need to look at it across the value chain, and specifically the role of SMMEs across the value chain, because they need to be skilled across the value chain and not just in one or two areas. So that's also important. Thank you. So I want to move on to a question relating to PGMs. And maybe Deputy Minister Majola, this is probably directed to you. How can we ensure that PGMs are made available to locally empowered manufacturing companies for beneficiation into the hydrogen economy related technologies? And this is a very important question because we do have a large endowment of PGMs which goes into the equipment required for hydrogen production. And rather than selling it off or exporting all of it, we need to be able to beneficiate it for local use into these equipment. So the question asks, how can we ensure that the PGMs are made available to locally empowered manufacturing companies?
Thanks, Moderator. I think this is a very important question. Let me not pretend that I can give a comprehensive and clear-cut answer to that. I think we require a conversation with this, on this matter with our Department of Mineral Resources and Energy to develop a clearer strategy. I don't know that in the Northwest Province, there have been initiatives there with regard to the Platinum Valley. I know that in the Limpopo Province, in the Tubatsi area, especially where we intended to establish a special economic zone, we now going to be focusing on ensuring that we can beneficiate in that special economic zone the minerals that come out of the mining areas in the Fetaho Tubatsi area in Limpopo. So this would happen in several mining areas in the country. So we've got to work out a comprehensive strategy as recommended with the various departments, including mineral resources and energy, to ensure that as we begin to beneficiate, that empowered companies can become part of the value chain. So I think mineral beneficiation is going to be one of the key focus areas for government as we move forward. And I look forward to us paying more attention, DM Kekana, in the Northwest and in Limpopo, especially in the special economic zones, to ensure that these become centers of beneficiation.
Maybe just to add, Mahandra, in my other life, Mr. Mashudu knows, I was the MEC of Economic Development and Tourism in Limpopo. And the reason why we made 2 applications for the SEZ, the one in Musina was more on logistics and one-stop border post. And if you look at the Begersfort one, it was more on the fuel cells. It was anchored around beneficiation of PGMs and using fuel cells. And that's why we had that partnership with the University of Cape Town. But what I can also say, Limpopo entity, which Mr. Mashudu Ramano once chaired, it is now called Limpopo Economic Development Agency, has a branch in it that owns a mining company. And in that mining company, they've got licenses for PGMs and so on. And this is an opportunity where a provincial government can empower SMMEs to access the raw material and then be able to beneficiate. It's one element where we can realize the public-private partnership initiated by government.
Thank you, Deputy Ministers. And I think, the role of also incentives and government support is going to be important when it comes to PGMs, and making sure that local companies can also beneficiate them in a way that will benefit the country from a macroeconomic perspective. Thank you. So I think the next one is an important one, and it's probably directed. It's coming from Mr. Mashudu Romano, directed to both DMs. It says that we have received proposals to develop a woman in hydrogen accelerator program. What support can we expect from government?
That one is for DM Kekana.
No, it can be. You have the financial resource to do that. I will mobilize, and I'm going to work with the likes of Mashudu and them to mobilize women behind this program of hydrogen economy. Mobilize women and youth behind this program. So IDC, all our funding institutions, including the DTIC and many other strategic departments, have to be available to make sure that those initiatives are funded. I hear what Mr. Mashudu is saying, but I also think, the fact that we want clean energy and other things, international funders will also play a role in helping us. But the need is for us to be more organized. I see Germany is coming handy on some of these things. So we need to be more organized, more structured, and understand each one's role, the kind of support that all the role players will want to play. And based on that, we can then be able to do that. But I can tell you, the women and youth are top on the agenda of this initiative. And I think the support must come from across, whether horizontal and vertical, amongst ourselves.
Thank you, Deputy Minister. And yes, so to the person who asked the question, we can definitely see we've got good support right from government.
Yeah.
But the message there is we need to be organized, especially considering that we will have grant funding coming in for the hydrogen economy that will be used towards projects from the likes of Germany, etc., that have already announced that they have grant funding available. But the message I hear is let's be organized to make use of that grant funding in a way that's also going to empower women and youth, and possibly help with setting up this woman in hydrogen accelerator program. So that's an important point. Let's be ready for it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, moderator. We stand ready from the DTIC side to provide support. So DM Kekana can call on us. So we already working with the NEF and the IDC to ensure that we can strengthen their contribution to transformation as we give support to various companies and in different industries. So it's an issue that we have learned during COVID and during the unrest that we saw in early July as we're helping companies, that transformation has become a critically important issue. So we're now working on it. So we will be supporting the presidency in that regard.
Thank you very much, DM. And thanks so much, Mr. Mahandra and the organizers. We need more of these engagements. People must know South Africa is hard at work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think we can move to close the session of Q&As. We've, I think, had a very healthy discussion and a lot along how we need to align from a government perspective. We're seeing a lot of unity coming along, and that's really great, and a lot of support from the presidency right down to other government departments. So I think with those very encouraging words, we can move to close this session. We are running ahead of schedule, and that is a good thing. So, and I think we do have planned a comfort break, which was scheduled for 10 minutes. So let's move into the comfort break now, I think. And if we could, all try to come back by 10:35, please. So we've got 15 minutes, and then we can start again our next session at 10:35. Thank you very much. Sithole. Welcome back all, and I trust all had a good break and are ready for our panel discussion session next. So we have three speakers on this panel, namely Mr. Rola Sithole from the VAL SEZ, Dr. Stefan Lieben from Conjuncta GmbH, and Mr. William Mabapa. So first, I want to introduce Mr. Rola Sithole, who is the Program Director of the VAL SEZ. Mr. Sithole is an experienced development finance practitioner, business executive, and entrepreneur. Mr. Sithole's career spans across multiple private and public-owned enterprises. He started his career at Unilever in 1993, from where he joined the Industrial Development Corporation between 1994 and 2003. Mr. Sithole joined Akula Enterprises Finance, now CEFA, between 2003 to 2009, in the capacity as the Chief Executive Officer before building his own company that provided tailored consulting services to private and public sector clients. In 2015, he was appointed as the Chief Executive Officer of the Mpumalanga Economic Growth Agency. Mr. Sithole is currently contracted as a technical advisor to the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition within the Industrial Delivery Program and assigned as the Program Director for the VAL SEZ program. So the SEZs are a very important component in providing incentives for companies who want to set up businesses locally. And we're glad to have Mr. Sithole here to talk about specifically the VAL SEZ. So with that introduction, I'll now hand you over to Mr. Sithole to start off the panel discussion session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Program Director, and good morning to everyone else. I'd like to just validate that you can see my presentation. If you can, thank you for the opportunity. As the VAL SEZ, we are very pleased to have had the opportunity to collaborate with the hydrogen economy in Indaba. Our objective, our mission is to contribute towards reigniting the birthplace of industrialization in South Africa, which is the VAL area. My presentation will be a brief introduction, touch on a little bit on contextual issues, and then describe the opportunity and how the VAL SEZ links to the hydrogen economy before I conclude. The objective that the VAL SEZ is pursuing is to develop a multi-sector, multi-site special economic zone in the VAL region, the Sedibeng district or the Southern Development Corridor of the Gauteng City region, with the purpose of regenerating the area and supporting new economic activity, building on the strong historic competitive capabilities and skills of the area. The vision is to build a cohesive society with sustained economic growth, resulting in quality jobs, the creation and retention of quality jobs. And the hydrogen economy is a key component of this strategy and presents vast economic development opportunities. We need to just affirm what is known to all of us, that the VAL region has experienced a marked decline in economic activity since the late 90s as a result of the downturn in the steel industry and other related industries that are central to the economy of the VAL and the economic activity in the VAL. Today, there are very few industries that remain untouched by that downturn, and they operate at a much less significant scale. what is more acute is the fact that these industries have not been replaced by new business or industrial activity, leading to economic decay, that is obvious to all, leading to a fragile society where you see a lot of social unrest and service delivery protests. We have issues around the implementation of policy. We have issues around infrastructure backlogs, severe and chronic lack of maintenance of the infrastructure, aging infrastructure. We have issues, as I've pointed out, around economic diversification that remain unresolved. And we have issues of environmental issues around air quality, which means that young, talented people are living in droves away from the region to seek means of livelihood elsewhere. So this is the context within which the vision for the Val SZ is being developed. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are inherent advantages to the Val area arising from its position as the birthplace of industrialization in South Africa. And the first instance, it's the culture and people. There's a long history of industrialization in the area. There's a long, pocket of skills relevant for industrialization, reindustrialization. There are academic institutions. There's a young population. So that gives an advantage that we need to leverage on. The second element is that there continue to be existing businesses who are committed to staying in the area, collaborating with government to resolve the issues that will unlock or enable economic rejuvenation. And these businesses, survey in and survey out, have indicated in the majority that they don't intend to leave the Vaal area, that they would like to see solutions. So that's a positive. It's an advantage for the area that there are private sector partners and investors who are willing to collaborate with government in advancing the economic rejuvenation. There are vast tracts of land that is undeveloped, which is available at competitive prices. That land which is contiguous to industrial zones that are highly developed over decades. So it's easy to expand into those pieces of land. The infrastructure exists. It's not going to be very difficult with proper governance within the local municipalities to restore a culture of maintaining the infrastructure. There are solutions. There is a political will. There is interventions by national and provincial government to assist in the restoration of the infrastructure capabilities of the area, and that is not an unsurmountable challenge. And therefore, we see it as an opportunity, as an advantage. In defining the opportunity, I think it's been said over and again, and it's in the context in particular of the hydrogen economy, that you can't continue with the conditions that I've just described. You have to transition this industrial basin onto a low carbon path. You have to work with existing businesses to continue to support their growth and development, but also to assist them in transitioning into a new green economy future. Over and above that, you have to look at newer industries like the hydrogen economy and the opportunities that all of these attributes I mentioned present for you to take advantage of. The existing industries need to evolve. They simply do not have an option. The status quo is untenable. You cannot continue to, if you want to stem the decline and actually change the trajectory on an upward economic growth trajectory, the existing industries need to transform onto a low carbon economy path. We need to exploit the advantages that we have as a country and as a region for the production of renewables and the utilization of those renewables in this low carbon economy, and to advance competitiveness for all our industries. Hydrogen is a key element of that. But there are also opportunities born by all of the attributes I mentioned, born of those attributes around agriculture and agro-processing throughout the value chain that we need to exploit. We need to reskill and upskill the massive resources available who have strong industrial skills from having worked in this birthplace of industrialization in South Africa over many years, and to train people for the industries of the future. We have an opportunity to build resilient infrastructure that is reliable, accessible, and affordable, and to exploit the locational advantages that the region presents. So the business case, the Deputy Minister Majola has touched on this, but the business case is principally around 6 elements. It's around a green energy fueled reindustrialization of the Vaal, and envisioning a Vaal of the future, which is a hub of low carbon manufacturing, renewable energy production, and hydrogen, and the hydrogen economy. The second one is investments in the food, agriculture, and agro industries value chain. Cannabis and the newer crops is a key element of that, but there are various other opportunities with existing crops, livestock, and other in the processing of those raw materials that exists within and throughout the Sedibeng district. There is opportunities in gateway logistics through air, road, rail, and the river itself to exploit these locational advantages of the Sedibeng district. There are corridors between Gauteng and the inland and the coast and the rest of the African continent that position the Vaal as a region very, very strategically in order to participate in the development of logistics hubs that can take advantage of economic growth elsewhere and also revive the economy within that region. There are opportunities along the Vaal River for the blue economy, for all the requirements of the blue economy over the river, the boating industries and the manufacturing associated with that, and services and other industries that are ancillary to that industry that need to be exploited. There is the tourism sector that needs to be exploited. You would know that very often in the developed world, France, Germany, the UK, for example, in Europe, most of those cities that are thriving economies now, developed economies, are built around a river, and the Vaal is not there in comparison. Obviously, this is a long-term game, but eventually you want to be able to transition the Vaal into an area that takes advantage of this natural attribute. The other part is building a smart city along the Vaal River that will enable SEZ development and drive urban regeneration. So that is going to happen as we implement the special economic zone. It's not just about the factories and industries there. You need to crowd in the young people, the skills, and yet people need to have a place to live and work and play that is suitable to support the SEZ. So it's strategic as a pillar in the execution of the Vaal SEZ business case. And lastly, and it's been spoken about as well, it's about building strong local linkages between township, rural economies with the value chains that the Vaal SEZ will develop and strengthen. I will speak to that a little later further. So what are the near-term priorities for the establishment of the VAL SEZ? We are involved in the process now of completing the VAL SEZ master plan, which is going to define the opportunities, position the VAL SEZ in the manner that I described around our business case, refine the infrastructure requirements, the funding models, the investor pipeline, etc. So that is a priority that we're engrossed with at the moment. The second element is the development of a pipeline of firm investment commitments. We already have strong indicative investments, and as been pointed out, we welcome the indication that the mitochondria energy will locate its Project Phoenix investment on fuel cells within the VAL SEZ. And that catalyzes through the entire value chain and the hydrogen economy and the renewable space, a lot of other opportunities and other investors that can locate within the SEZ as a result of that. The Gauteng province, the Premier, tomorrow is hosting the Sedibeng Investment Conference in the VAL, which is another initiative to seek a lot of investors, existing, expanding investors, as well as new investors, to crowd them into the region, the Sedibeng district, and in the VAL SEZ. And that has been received with a lot of interest. It's a hybrid event, so a link is available for that, which we can share. But that event, the response has been very positive, and we're getting lots of ideas and potential to strengthen that pipeline, because that is the single most important thing, other than the infrastructure, obviously, which must be a given, meaning the resolution of the infrastructure challenges must happen in order for the SEZ to be designated. But what drives the new approach for the implementation of special economic zones in South Africa is investor-led, investment-led. So you would know that the example that is used most often now is the Tshwane Automotive SEZ, which was done in a very quick turnaround, simply because there was a substantial commitment from the Ford Motor Company and also the related supply chain associated with it for investment in that SEZ. And as government, all the way up to cabinet and the president, everything was done to ensure that SEZ is executed in an accelerated fashion. So the point being, securing firm investment commitments advances the implementation of an SEZ, including the resolution of infrastructure challenges that I've spoken about earlier. The next near-term priority is to break ground in next year, in 2022, with this VAL SEZ. And we're under pressure from investors such as Mitochondria and others to get ready, we've identified and secured the land required, and to get ready for them to be able to get on site within a designated SEZ during the course of 2022. So why is the VAL SEZ a sponsor of the hydrogen economy in Indaba, or why is this engagement, this conversation of interest to us? A key one is, as been said by many others before me, the deputy ministers in particular, is that it's central to the value proposition of the VAL SEZ, the hydrogen economy. So we are pursuing, in partnership with private investors, the development and implementation of a hydrogen valley, essentially an innovation cluster within the VAL SEZ that will crowd in all investments, well, a lot of investments within the hydrogen value chain within the SEZ, and assist in this decarbonization, transitioning, repositioning of the VAL as an industrial basin. So we want to be the preeminent hub for the hydrogen economy within the context of a national plan for the development of a hydrogen economy, as both deputy ministers have pointed out. And so the things that we will be focused on is developing the hydrogen market for the Gauteng and beyond, hydrogen-based energy security for SEZ within Gauteng, developing solar capabilities to support the hydrogen market, developing a hydrogen value chain that supports the greening of manufacturing industries in the Vaal, localization of production of renewable energy components, enabling IPPs at municipal level to scale up green energy production or beneficiation, skills development in the hydrogen sector, entrenching the development and advancement of Black industrialists involved in the hydrogen economy, and supporting hydrogen economy supply chains within township-based and underserved industrial hubs. So this is what we see as the Vaal SEZ, as the opportunities. We are in engagement with a lot of you in the room today, large and small, about making sure that this vision is realized. We are conscious of the fact that there has to be a realistic assessment of the fact that there's existing infrastructure and capabilities that must be utilized, along with mapping this medium to long-term strategy for the establishment of the Vaal as a preeminent hub for the hydrogen economy. So we're doing both things at the same time, and I think that is possible. So in conclusion, the Vaal SEZ is a multi-sector, multi-site special economic zone that's being developed in the Vaal region, with the mission to contribute towards economic rejuvenation of the area, building on the historic competitive strengths of and skills base of the area. The focus is on low carbon economic clusters, while continuing to support the growth and development of existing industries and helping transition them to a green economy future. We will be the hub, one of the country's preeminent hubs for the nascent hydrogen economy, and we will crowd in both domestic and foreign direct investment throughout the value chain for this purpose. What's important that I wanted to point out earlier is often in South Africa, we talk about new industries, we establish new industries, and then 20 years later we say, no, let's now focus on transforming those industries. So for us as the Vaal SEZ, it's very important that we design the ownership and participation models that will take advantage of the opportunities that the hydrogen economy presents now. We don't have to try and transform it 20 years later. We want it to be built from scratch as an inclusive economy, and as has been pointed out by both deputy ministers. So we are inviting investors to partner with us in reigniting the birthplace of industrialization in South Africa. And I wish everyone here well through this webinar, and I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sithole. And there you go, investors, and a clear invitation for you to come and look at the opportunities available at the Vaal SEZ for you. So please take that up. And thank you, Mr. Sithole, for emphasizing the importance of the SEZ in the economic rejuvenation of the area, and also for telling us the status of the SEZ. I think it helps for future businesses to know where you are in the process, and we're looking forward to it as becoming one of those key important hydrogen hubs for the country. So we will move on to our next speaker in the panel, but I just want to a few housekeeping things to remind you. Firstly, to please post your questions on the chat. We will have a question and answer session after the three speakers are done. And there's also a poll on the chat. Feel free to go and take part in the poll. And you also can go in and, excuse me, to go in and list what your expectations are for this event and vote for them. So please, I encourage you to participate in that way, and so that we can make most beneficial use of this webinar today. Thank you very much. So with that, I would like to move on to introducing our next speaker, which is Dr. Stefan Liebing. Dr. Stefan Liebing is from Conjuncta GmbH, who will talk to us on keys for South African entrepreneurs to access and develop international opportunities in the sector. Dr. Stefan Liebing is the chairman of Afrika Verein der Deutschen Wirtschaft e.V., the prestigious German African Business Association, where as part of his role, he advises the German government on investments in Africa. Dr. Liebing is the CEO of Conjuncta GmbH, a boutique investment and project development company. Previously, Dr. Liebing held various senior positions at the international gas business at EnBW Energie Baden-Württemberg AG, one of the largest energy supply companies in Europe, and earlier in his career at Royal Dutch Shell. Over to you, Dr. Liebing. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Greetings from Hamburg, Germany. It's a pleasure and an honor to be part of this important meeting, and I'd like to start by commending the team for setting this up, because I strongly believe that green hydrogen has the potential of being the next big thing for Africa and for European-African business cooperation. Although we are supposed to talk about Africa and indeed South Africa today, let me start by informing you about what's happening in Europe and in Germany as far as the energy system and hydrogen is concerned. People in Brussels on an EU level are busy preparing for something they call Fit for 55, which is nothing else than the plan to completely remove CO2 emissions from society, from the business system within the next about 35 years. Germany has just adopted a law that defines that the country wants to be entirely CO2 neutral by 2045. So that is less than 25 years. Now, today, Germany imports about two-thirds of its energy needs from abroad. And that is mainly in the form of coal, lignite, oil, natural gas, fossil fuels. Now, if all of this is to become green, a lot of people here have understood that it's impossible to replace all of that by renewable energy generation, power generation within the country. We would need to build 5 to 7 times what we have already in terms of wind or solar generation capacity, and there's just not going to be enough space, let alone the question of storage and peak demands. So everybody here is clear that it's not something we can do by ourselves, but where we need strong partners to help us in supplying new green forms of energy where oil, natural gas, etc. has been coming in the past. Now, the government has understood that this requires significant involvement and support for developing such new markets, and a lot of industry players are now clear that these imports, maybe it's not two-thirds, maybe it's going to be 50 or 40 or whatever percent in future, but these imports will need to be in form of products that are based on green hydrogen, although transformed into something else that's a bit easier to transport and to handle. So the government has put up an initial support program of 9 billion euros to support various technology developments, as well as the development of a market for green hydrogen. And I'm going to inform you a bit in a bit more detail afterwards what that's actually going to mean. So talking about a small, relatively small country in global terms such as Germany, there is going to be significant need for green hydrogen-based products from abroad, and obviously Europe and other parts of the world are going to add even more to that strong demand. So why is it that I'm saying green hydrogen has the potential of being the next big thing for Africa? Quite obviously, Africa, with its huge opportunities and potential, both in wind and solar power, has the potential of becoming one of the key suppliers of the world with this new form of energy. I believe that over the next maybe 10 years, the question will be decided what countries will be in the lead and will be replacing those countries that have so far supplied energy to the rest of the world in the form of oil and natural gas. So I'm quite sure in 10 years' time, we are going to see a new type of OPEC, maybe a green PEC consortium that will comprise of completely different countries than is the case today. But of course, also OPEC countries don't sleep. They have fully understood what the challenge is, and they're also working on green energy projects, on hydrogen projects in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, in Dubai, and the likes. And we see new non-oil producing countries in Africa that are quite far as well. You might have seen that Namibia is currently tendering for 2 lots where investors could come and do 2.5 gigawatts projects each reserved for the production of green hydrogen. So a lot is happening, and I believe South Africa has got a good basis and a good potential to be part of that game, but we need to move fast together. When speaking to industry players from Europe, they are all very sure that within a few years, off-takers of green products are going to pay a premium compared to conventional chemical products made from natural gas or oil. When we talk about ammonia, when we talk about methanol, there is going to be demand for green product that is not yet there for 2 reasons. One is the global development of increasing CO2 prices or taxes or whatever the regime is going to look like in individual countries, but products with a huge CO2 footprint are going to become more expensive, so that green products will be competitive very soon, although they are a bit more expensive today. Now, the second aspect on top of CO2 pricing is going to be the need and the requirement of customers, of end customers, to buy fully green products in future. So we will see that textiles that have been treated with chemicals will have a different price if they are treated on a CO2 neutral basis. We will see that cruise ships will be priced differently depending on whether they are running on conventional LNG, natural gas, including its CO2 portion, or whether they are run on so-called synthetic LNG, which is going to be CO2 neutral. And we are very sure there will be consumers that are ready to pay a premium for these green hydrogen-based products, whether it's in tourism, in classical B2C business, in consumables, but that goes down to car manufacturers that are planning to make all of the plants worldwide CO2 neutral. They will need green type of hydrogen-based energy products. They will need steel made from green or produced with energy supplies from green sources, because their end customers are going to ask for CO2 neutral products. So everybody's talking about green hydrogen. Something that is still to be discussed is what would be the best form of transforming this hydrogen into products that can be handled better, that can be transported more easily, whether we talk about methane, which is nothing else than synthetic, artificially generated natural gas, methanol, ammonia, etc., is something that is still going to be subject to various pilot plants. But this is known technology, and it's just a matter of scaling it to a size that you can produce enough products for export and to make supplies to world markets commercially doable. Here in Germany, we've had the first fueling of an LNG ship with completely green synthetic LNG just 2 weeks ago. And that is going to be what shipping lines, what logistics companies are going to ask for in future. Now, if we want to do these investments together, and if we want a significant share of this to be in Africa, we are talking about multi-billion-dollar projects. I think each of them is going to be in the range of more than $1 billion, maybe 2, 3, 5. That is what is being discussed in similar projects around the world. So it's not easy for an African economy and society to just do this by themselves. I believe we are going to talk about significant shares of international investment, but it's important for African societies to define, as with oil producing countries, as they did in the past, to define how foreign investors could come in, at what conditions, and what share of the cake governments and local investors want to take. But with all of these type of investments on a project finance basis, other than a competitive price, which I talked about, what we need is a very strong bankable off-taker that makes it possible for banks to come in to provide debt for such big projects over 10, 15, 20 years. Now, the German government has set up something that I find quite convincing, and that's what they call the H2 Global Foundation. That's a foundation that is provided with guarantees and German government money in the range of more than €1 billion, and that is going to hand out 10 years off-take contracts for green hydrogen-based products, supported and guaranteed by the German government. That is going to make pilot projects these days bankable, and therefore financing should not be so much of an issue, because once you have a strong off-taker such as the German government that provided these guarantees, banks should be quite comfortable to participate in that type of hydrogen projects. Now, with this, we believe we can accelerate the development of a market, because investors would not need to care about the question whether they can find an off-taker for their product and at what price. They will just apply for an off-take contract with this government foundation, and they will quote a price that makes economic sense to their projects. The government is going to buy that product and will auction it off in yearly tranches, and therefore try to capture as much of the market price in Europe as possible. But they are well aware that there might be a gap that they need to bridge and subsidize for the first few years, so that this chicken and egg problem is their first market demand at a reasonable price, or do we first need generation capacity so that market demand can develop? That chicken and egg is going to be solved by this government initiative that I believe makes a lot of sense. So with some of these initiatives, we are going to see a market developing sooner than we believe, and I believe that something like this offtake foundation could help us in jointly developing a new market as soon as possible. And South Africa, I believe, has the potential, with its strong economy, its well-educated people, has the potential of becoming a partner of choice, a preferential partner of choice, also of Germany. You might have seen that the two governments have signed a hydrogen cooperation initiative already. So with this, let me close and take any questions that you might have when we come to the Q&A session. Thanks for having me, and I wish us all success and good luck in making this a joint success story. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Liebing. And I think firstly, you reminded us about the important H2 Global program. And I think, we have seen a lot of interest and projects being actually started in South Africa to produce green hydrogen for the export market. And activity is building momentum. Projects are being developed. But it's an important reminder to those project participants to take advantage of the H2 Global program, which will make your projects quite bankable in securing offtakes. So thanks for reminding us about that, Dr. Liebing. I think the other important thing is I think that's thank you for that, Dr. Liebing. We have a couple of questions which we'll take in our Q&A section later, but I think now we can move on to our next speaker. So our next speaker is Mr. William Mabapa, and Mr. Mabapa worked his way up through the ranks in the platinum sector. He is from National Union of Mine Workers, NUM. He was first elected and NUM branch chairperson at Anglo-American Platinum's Mogalakwena section in 1994 and became a NUM Northeast Regional Secretary in 2002. He has been NUM Deputy General Secretary since 2015. Mr. Mabapa will talk to us on the role of NUM in championing a just transition towards a green economy for the people and workforces in South Africa. Thank you, Mr. Mabapa, for joining us today, and over to you.
Program Director, let me take this opportunity to appreciate the coordinators of this seminar to invite NUM. And I think my topic is relevant. That is the role of the NUM in the championing a just transition towards a green economy for people and the workforce. But I just want to check, Chairperson, that I did send a presentation. I don't know whether I must just go through talking on it without it being presented. Yeah, thank you. So, like I was saying, that the topic that I was requested to talk about is the role of NUM in championing a just transition towards a green economy for people and workforces. I'm not gonna go to deal with the who's controlling the screen. Chairperson.
Hi, sir. I'm controlling the screen. If you can just tell us when you want to move to the next slide, that'll be great. Thank you.
I'm on the third slide.
Okay, on the third slide. Thank you. If you can just say next slide, or as we move on to the next slide, we can control that for you. Thank you. Good luck.
On my on this slide, I'm just raising points that I'm going to deal with it. We can go to the other slides. Can we? Okay, thanks. For a long time, Labour has been engaging in discussion on a just transition in the energy space. At the center of the transition is a move away from a use of coal in energy generation to using it as an alternative, clean energies, especially renewable energies. So that will then replace the current coal. And such a move has far-reaching implications to a coal-rich country such as South Africa, as we know that South Africa is rich in coal. And if we just do this just transition without mitigating the coal employees, the impact or the effect is that we will then have job losses. And that is something that we want to just engage, that we understand that there must be a change. We support that there must be a change, but we hope that the change must be managed and be mitigated in a manner that does not destroy the current job. And Labour acknowledge that the energy for the future will change. However, it wants the process of the change to be managed in such a way that it does not negatively affect workers, communities, and the countries economy as a whole. Reaching an agreement on the process has proved complex due to difference in interest and focus on different stakeholders. The other page, and NUM remains actively involved in processes of mapping a just energy transition. It is important to have the same understanding of the definition of a just transition in the energy space, given the different interest of stakeholders in the process. Just transition refers to the process of interventions aimed at making sure that workers and their communities who may lose their jobs and livelihoods due to environmental protection policies and accompanying migration to cleaner energies will be supported. The concept of the just transition was conceptualized and developed by the trade union movement, although at the moment there are many parties that seems to champion it. From a worker's perspective, for the energy transition to be considered just, it has to be characterized by the following elements or pillars. Social dialogue, a process which involves various social partners who negotiate towards certain policy agreements in the best interest of whom they represent. Social protection, making sure that the poor and the vulnerable citizens whose livelihood may be negatively affected are protected through the harm. Rights of work, rights at work, ensuring that workers' rights are not compromised in the process. Employment protection and creation, making sure that the existing jobs are protected and new jobs opportunity are created. The just transition needs to embrace all pillars to be considered just. Regarding the social dialogue, NUM has been engaged on various platforms with various stakeholders to make sure that the policy and implementation of energy change in the country is in the best interest of the workers, especially workers in the mining and energy sector. Stakeholders which the NUM has been talking to include government, energy employees, civil society. As an example, the union is engaging with the government towards the repurposing of Komati Power Station to ascertain what the new employment opportunities can be created so as not to leave the workers behind when the station is decommissioned. The NUM has used platforms like COSA to network and various commissions on energy and just transition to strongly air its views on how it would want the energy transition to happen. The key message being that such a transition should not make any party worse off. Regarding the social protection, the involvement of NUM in social protection interventions has been and is being done through its implementation agencies, particularly the Mine Workers Development Agency. We do have a Mine Workers Development Agency, and with that entity, which is called the MDA, it is tasked with providing integrated development, intervention, and survival skills to target communities whose lives are threatened by new developments, including changes in the energy space. And I can just give an example or many examples of what that agency is doing. Through the programs like poverty alleviation, food security, the MDA contributes toward providing a social safety net for those whose lives are being threatened by changes in the energy sector and the extension to mine workers and mining communities. And I can say that this is those projects that we normally run even when mines themselves, whether or not in the coal, in any sector. We did this for almost 20 years. This agency was there for almost 20 years. When there is retrenchment in the mines, that agency is mitigating those job losses in repurposing those employees with certain skills, like in farming, where they will train them, where they will assist them establish the farming. If it's a project, whatever project that people can do, like t-shirt making, those are some of the things that that project, that MDA was doing. NUM has made sure that communication forums are established and are fully operational at branch level. Branch level is like in our operations. If it is the mines, it is in the mines. If it is in the power stations, it's in the power stations. And communication forums are a platform in which employers brief shop steward of any changes they intend to introduce in the workplace and in working conditions. Communication forums gives an opportunity to scrutinize any changes in workplace environments and working conditions to ensure that workers' rights are not violated. As the just transition unfolds, it is important that workers' rights fought for over time are not compromised. Regarding the employment protection and creation, this pillar is at the center of the union's work and is not only limited to transition in the energy sector. NUM has been actively fighting against job losses that are being caused by pressure to move away from coal energy generation to alternative energies, especially renewable energies that are in the hands of the private sector. The union has been and is still in a struggle to save jobs at ESCOM. That is a result of ESCOM giving away business to independent power producers. The union is also involved in reskilling initiatives for its members and repurposing its initiative for coal power stations to be decommissioned as part of employment protection of its members. In conclusion, NUM believes in clean energy, takes the concerns of climate change seriously, but stands firm that any changes should not be at the cost of employment and livelihoods of communities. NUM will continue to fight the good fight towards protection of the workers' interests and their communities within the just transition framework. The union is concerned by the speed at which the energy transition is being implemented before putting in place safeguards for those that may be negatively affected. The union is standing firm in its resistance to an energy transition where workers tend to be negatively impacted. The union wants the transition to be just, not only in words but in practical terms as well, and is ready to be constructive partner in the process. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, but I want to also raise it sharply that as NUM, we do support just transitions, but we are saying that we must manage it. We will form part and we are part of the initiative, and we will support it all throughout until its conclusion, that no employee must lose out of this transition. Ladies and gentlemen, let me, and dear comrades, allow me to take this moment to thank Hydrogen Economy for affording NUM the opportunity to share their views on its role in championing a just transition towards a green economy for the people and the workforces. I thank you. Amandla.
Thank you, Mr. Mabapa, and I think it's very important that we did get the voice of the labor union into the hydrogen economy today. It's a start, and we need to hear more of this. You have clearly defined for us the real definition of just transition. So thanks for setting that straight. And I think it's important that you also listed those characteristics that's required for the just transition. And you clearly emphasize the need for a strong social compact with labor as you try and develop this hydrogen economy. Thank you for your words, Mr. Mambapa. We will now move into the panel session, the question and answer session of this panel session with all three panelists. Thank you very much. I see the panelists all on stage. So first question that I have is for Mr. Sitole relating to the VAL SEZ, and it asks what landlord-tenant model options will the VAL SEZ offer for future tenants?
Thank you, Mahendra. The landlord-tenant options that we offer in the VAL SEZ are consistent with what other special economic zones provide. They are built to be flexible to the needs of the investor. So what the SEZ as a concept is a geographically designated area where infrastructure is brought on and reticulated within in order for there to be development of serviced stands on which top structures can be built. So the investor has an option to sign a land lease where they can then develop the top structure on their own on that land lease, or the investor has an option to specify what kind of top structure they require, and for the SEZ fund then to finance the building of that top structure, and therefore for there to be a standard lease for that with terms such that at the end of the period the structure could revert to the SEZ. But fundamentally, it's either land lease or a full lease of the facility and the land. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So the next one we have for Dr. Liebing relates to the H2 Global program, Dr. Liebing. So I know you're probably closer to it than us, and so maybe you can help us to answer this. Will there be caps placed on the prices in the H2 Global program? Right. So you did mention that I think it's understood that some of the price to generate green hydrogen will be a premium, and that's accepted by the H2 Global program. But will there be limitations or caps on these prices that will be accepted?
Obviously, I'm not part of H2 Global as an organization, so I can also just inform you of what I've heard and what my knowledge is. For more binding answers, I'm sure people can visit their website. But my understanding of the process is that H2 Global is going to invite investors, invite potential suppliers for tenders. And in these tenders, they will quote a price that works for these investors and that makes their projects doable at today's market environment. So it's sort of on a cost plus basis, looking at production cost rather than what demand, what the market price would dictate. And then obviously the organizers of that program are going to compare offers from different parts of the world, and we'll see what product is offered at the cheapest price, still given an assessment of people's ability to deliver the project, to deliver for the next 10 years, etc. But I can't see a price cap would make sense. I think they would try to bring the price down by a comparison within that tender. And therefore people should try to offer something that is reasonable, so that they have a chance of competing with supplies from other parts of the world, but I can't see a cap. I can't hear the moderator now.
Yes, Mahendra, are you there?
Hi, gents. It appears that we've lost the connection with the moderator. So until we get him back, I think we can flag the next question, which was posted here. Let me just send that through to you. This is a question for Mr. Mabapa. If you can answer that, and we'll try and get the moderator back. Thank you.
Okay. No, what happens is that, for example, if currently we do have the coal mines, and then we do have the power stations. Now, if a coal mine is affected, obviously the mine must create the programs to reskill the workers. Under the current mining arrangement with the DMRE, there is a fund for rehabilitation, for example, is a lot of money, it's billions of money. So those are some of the monies that can be used to reskill the workers and refocus them to certain skills. It is something that is also done when the mines are closing. For example, you'll find that the mine come to an end, the life of the mine come to an end, the oil is depleted. So in terms of the rules and the requirement of the mines, they must have a budget to reskill these workers. The same as the power stations, we take it that if the power station is to be repurposed, obviously the skills and what these people were doing is not going to be the same. So these workers must then be trained for the new roles of the new purpose. Yeah, I will take it that it is the employers that take the responsibility to make this or fund these reskilling or upskilling programs.
All right, folks, we've got Mahendra back in. I'm bringing him back onto stage. Thank you. Mahendra, just so you know, we had a loss of connection with you. We asked William his question in the questions, and if you can continue from there, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so sorry for that. There's a break in communication here at work. I apologize. So I'm back in. Mr. Mbapa, back to you. Thank you.
Unless there is another question, I did respond the moderator when you were not there, but just for the sake of you, I was saying that the people that must be responsible for upskilling or reskilling these employees are if it is a power station, obviously then it will then be the responsibility of ESCOM in our situation. And if it is the mine, it will then be the responsibility of the mine. We must be mindful that in South Africa, any power station is linked to a mine. So because they are coal-fired power stations, so every power station is linked to a mine. So when you stop or you change the strategy at the power station, not to use the coal, it means you must repurpose both the workers at the power station and the workers at the coal mine so that you mitigate. But in the mines, upfront, there is a fund. Employers are required to have this fund. Part of the money is with the Department of Minerals and Energy, but part of the money is the one that the employer themselves has to keep, particularly during the process of Section 189 for reskilling and upskilling. So the employers do have that budget. It's a requirement for the employers that at all times they need to have that budget.
Thank you, and sorry for asking you to repeat yourself, but thanks. That was very important for us to understand that. Next question. So we have a technical question, and I'm looking at Prof. Liebing for this, but it relates to the transportation of and exporting of green hydrogen. So it says, which technologies or methods will SA adopt to ensure that it is cost effective to transport or export green hydrogen?
I think that is indeed a very important question. And before talking about export, let me talk about a local use of the product. As I said, one of the difficulties at the moment is that in South Africa, with its relatively low CO2 pricing, a lot of green hydrogen-based products will just still be more expensive than conventional products. And therefore, there is a few niches where you can apply them commercially at the moment, but not too many. And therefore, I believe a pilot project will most likely have a share for export. Now, for this export, there is various aspects to look at. Again, it's a question of how price compare against conventional products. that include CO2. And that is why Germany has said, we still believe it's difficult to just do this on a market basis. Therefore, we need to subsidize to a certain degree, and that is exactly what this foundation is going to do to develop the market. Now, in terms of technologies, mostly people talk about three different options on products that you can derive from hydrogen, being methane, which is nothing else than CO2 neutral natural gas, methanol, or ammonia. These three products, once the hydrogen has been converted to them, there is existing transport methods, there is existing infrastructure that can be used for transporting these products to Europe. You have ships that are used to transporting LNG or methanol or whatever. So that's possible. However, transport only makes sense once you have reached a certain quantity. We have been looking at the numbers and found out that a small pilot project of, I don't know, maybe 70 or 100 megawatts would only be able to produce enough methane or methanol to fill one ship every 3 years. So obviously it doesn't make sense to store the product for 3 years and then to send one tanker to bring it to Europe. So that is why we need to scale up these projects relatively quickly, which makes them capex intensive. And that is why I was saying we will need some international financial investors to come in, and they're only going to come in once you have a bankable, strong off-taker. We need to do this in partnership and under the supervision and definition of local governments, but I think that is the framework we have at the moment, and now we need to go and do first projects to demonstrate it works.
Thank you, Prof. If I can stay with you just for a couple more things. So there has been some questions posted around blue hydrogen. Obviously the possibility of using coal and then carbon capture and storage, which is blue hydrogen. Can you give us your opinion from an, South Africa's export perspective? What's the appetite for blue hydrogen, if it's coming from coal?
In fact, that is not an easy answer, an easy question to answer. When it comes to blue hydrogen, we need to be very clear that industry in Europe understands that this might be a bridging technology that makes it possible to start developing a hydrogen market. However, when it comes to governments, they are a bit more restrictive. So blue hydrogen, for example, would not qualify for this offtake scheme that the German government is setting up. So therefore, it would need to be a standalone commercial project. So we would need to look for off-takers in European industry, but it's not going to, it can't expect any subsidies or any government off-take contracts.
Okay, thanks for clarifying. I think it's important to know that, and the target should be green hydrogen for exports. The important thing about what you mentioned now is that the subsidies provided by H2 Global and other programs, some of them have been mentioned to be grant type of funding and concessional debt, etc., is what's going to make the business case in the near term, in the near future for South Africa as an exporter stronger by providing such concessional kind of funding. It makes a business case for export of green hydrogen stronger. So, and there are questions relating to the fact that yes, green hydrogen is more expensive compared to gray hydrogen, but having those kind of subsidies is what helps a business case to get our foot into the hydrogen market by exporting and then in parallel developing the local demand industry also. Thank you for that. Yeah, thank you. And I think one more thing, just a quick clarification from someone, Prof. Liebing, regarding, I think it relates to the H2 Global program, but it says, where can one get more information with regards to the guarantees that are backed by the 1 billion euros? And I'm assuming that refers to the H2 Global program. So I know there is a website, Prof. Liebing, but maybe if you can guide us, please.
Yes, let me look it up while we speak. But they do have a website, and it's indeed the 1 billion is the backing, and it's the budget also for the subsidies to cover the price gap. What it says is h2-global.de. At least that's the German version, and I guess there's an English one that you can access from there. h2-global.de.
Thank you. Okay, so let's move on to the next question, and to Mr. Sitole, relating to the SEZs and the energy forecast. Has the SEZ determined their energy forecast over the next 20 to 30 years? And is the land issue allocated and resolved in terms of environmental requirements?
Thank you, Mahendra. A direct answer to that is that answer is not known definitively at the moment. That's simply because we're still engaged in the process of developing the master plan. So the needs in terms of our energy forecasts on the for the SEZ will be defined in that when the conclusion of that master plan, and that is obviously related to the nature of investors that we will locate in the SEZ. So in respect of energy forecasts, we are a few months out before knowing the answer definitively. In respect of land, we are in the process of undertaking the necessary environmental assessments that will validate that those pieces of land can be included in the SEZ.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mabapa, I think next one to you. So you did express, the fact that we may be moving too quickly in decarbonizing without addressing the just part of the just transition. So I would like, for you to recommend to us where should the focus be to ensure that we do address the just transition in a proper way. So your focus, maybe 3 focus areas that we should, attend to in the near future. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Bambapa is on mute.
I've muted. No, I think what we are trying to say is that there is no proper planning in terms of this. For example, if there is a power station that ESCOM want to stop because they want to repurpose that power station, what normally will have happened in the past is that that power station will stop, and as to where the workers go is not an issue. If it is a mine, and then that mine will also stop as to where the workers goes, then it's not an issue. Our understanding is that we need to have long-term plans. If we know that by next year or in 2 years' time, we are going to stop a mine or we are going to stop a power station, we better then start to make some proper plannings now that in the 12 months or 24 months, we will then have created a plan as to how do we reskill and upskill the workers that are working there. But you must understand that some of these issues don't only affect workers who are working, they also affect the communities. Like in the mines, you have got the social labor plans. Part of the social labor plans is for the employers, particularly the mines, to do certain issues in the community. For example, you'll find that community people are suppliers in the mine. Community, mostly are suppliers. But you must also know that there is a lot of construction workers who are doing maintenance also during the operations of a mine. All those issues needs to be done within a period of time that by the time we come to the end of them, we will then have repurposed work in many areas. We may not address all the issues, but I will take it that it will be fair that more than 50% will have then mitigated, unlike the situation now where even 50% is not mitigated. If it's a town, it is where we start to create a ghost town, a town without economy.
Thank you. I think the point is well made there. We need to be proactive and we need to plan in advance and not wait for the jobs to be lost, but you plan ahead and reskill, and not, as you mentioned, the jobs, but also the SMMEs and community involvement, but it needs to happen in advance and not waiting for the last minute. So I think that point is well taken. Thank you. Okay, so I think we've come to the end of the question and answer sessions. I don't see anything more coming from the audience. So if there are no more further closing remarks, I think we can move on to the closing session. We have got Prof. Lucky Matabula with us, who's going to take us through to the closing session. So with that, I want to say thanks to the panelists for your talks and your insights you provided and making time to join us today. Thank you very much, panelists.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. So we have Prof. Lucky Matabula, who will take us through to the summarizing the outcomes and closing of today's session. And we're honored to have the Prof with us. He is the founder, CEO of the Think Foundation. Professor Matabula holds a Doctor of Administration from Pretoria University and was part of a Harvard Business School Senior Executive Program. He holds a Freiburg University IGR diploma. He has also been advisor to several high-placed individuals and has business interests in the health sector, health risk sector, financial services, agriculture, and property. Prof. Matabula is also a poet and a writer. Prof, I'll now hand over to you to do the summary and to close today's session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mahendra, for the good facilitation. We are partners to, we are associates to the Hydrogen Indaba, and I've been asked to be the last discussant so that I try as far as possible to summarize all the good ideas that have been said here and maybe posit a potential way forward. What has emerged from Minister Majola, which we need to pay attention as an industry, is that the Hydrogen Indaba should be an annual event. He made that clear that we should make it an annual event so that we are able to continuously be in the forefront of what is happening. Two, he indicated that the automotive industry, which is developed in South Africa, is a key area of focus for the takeoff of this industry, the hydrogen cells and whatever. So we need to have strategic interfaces with that industry because it is the biggest user of that. Then he also said that the platinum resource concentration in South Africa is actually an inherent strength for South Africa to enter and create templates of leadership in the hydrogen economy. I think with templates of leadership, he meant that we must make sure that we continue to keep the strategic leadership of the industry as South Africans. And the Prof from Germany actually underscored that. He even indicated that the hydrogen valley, which we are working towards building in the Val SEZ, will support and provide traction to the Platinum Valley objects of the National Industrialization Program in both Burgersfort and the Northwest. He indicated that there will be a need for the the downstream reduction of fossil fuel-dependent combustion machinery and mining factor inputs as key advantage for the hydrogen economy. He indicated that our mines are using a lot of industrial products that could be powered by hydrogen fuel cells and related. So he said we need to focus into that because that is the space that is advancing faster than we might be thinking. He even indicated that the hydrogen economy will be the centerpiece of the next industrialization phase of South Africa, because South Africa has serious need for a green, energy resilient economy. So he indicated that our industrialization program is going to be anchored on this hydrogen economy, so we should pursue this thing. He also indicated that the fuel cell value chains in the Val SEZ will give practical expression to industrialization as an objective of the district development model that government is piloting. So indicated that if we place this hydrogen economy valley that we want to put, it can actually become one of the models where the district development model advocated by President Ramaphosa could actually be made to have practical expression where everybody actually works in a district, in a zone. Then he indicated that there's a funding bouquet from government. You know, there's a bouquet of funding from government, notably in the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition. He indicated that that funding bouquet is being mobilized as we speak now. Is being mobilized to support the new hydrogen economy thrust. So the IDC and other bodies there have been mobilized to start looking into that place. So we are opportune and we need to look at that in terms of the objectives of this episode of the seminar that deals with ownership, structures, and all those things. He also indicated that the hydrogen economy is an innovation that will undergird or anchor Africa's quest to meeting its emissions reduction targets. He said that we must not look at it as a South African thing. The export potential of this and all those things will actually help us to help Africa to anchor its emission reduction targets by using the hydrogen fuel cells and related that will be produced in South Africa. Then in terms of black economic ownership, he did indicate that yes, there are inhibitors and the inhibitors will be finance and support. And he believes that the DTI has instruments that will assist us to go over that. He also indicated that the DTI in its drive of localization will actually be a strategic partner to manage this potential loss of control of the economy to established interest. He also indicated that competitiveness, whilst there will be competitiveness that will be protected by the DTI, but they will protect competitiveness as part of the industrialization and localization drive. So it won't be competitiveness for the sake of competitiveness, but it will be competitiveness for the sake of protecting local businesses and local markets so that we get into this growing export industry. Then Deputy Minister Kekana generally supported in many ways whatever, most of the things that Minister Majola said, and took a slant of repeating them, but within a green economy perspective. But she indicated sharply that our migration to a decarbonized economy requires a transition strategy that anchors all our policy obligations to the nation. So the nation has policy obligations that it has made. Government has made policy obligations, and we should look at this migration as something that must anchor all those policy obligations. And those policy obligations are policy obligations of SMME development, policy obligations of taking along marginalized businesses, dealing with what the NUM has indicated, that as you decommission other energy forms and introducing hydrogen energy, you need to have better migration policies that are going to ensure that you don't leave human beings as stranded assets of your project, but you repurpose them so that they become new assets of the new developing hydrogen economy. She also indicated the issues of financial inclusion is key to the transition from coal dependency. She indicated that government is very serious and deliberate in making sure that we reduce the coal dependence, the energy that has such a high coal dependency, and move to new alternative and renewable and sustainable resilient energy forms. But as we do of a new policy change. Then she also indicated that we need to create protective bouquets for local businesses, SMMEs, and social-based driven. I think I'm repeating that. And in the panel discussion, we also heard how the SEZ has actually openly invited the industry to basically move into the zone and start taking advantage of the instruments that government has put in place to attract investment, especially because that SEZ has been openly declared by the Premier in our opening episode of the Indaba, that the Vaal SEZ is actually Gauteng's hydrogen valley, and because of its locational advantages into Africa, into all other places in the continent, including its closeness to the water resources where hydrogen splitting and other things could be done efficiently. The SEZ has invited us to go into that. Then we got perspectives from Germany. What has been very pregnant out of the German experience is that we have been forewarned that there is a drive from the European Union, of course, particularly led by the German thrust, to actually look into new sources of hydrogen fuel cells and related, so that they can import them purely because of the land space and challenges that Europe has to can start big hydrogen valleys. So he indicated that there is fund and there are funds in Europe, especially a special mention was made of the 1 billion euro fund that is in Germany that has its own interesting conditions, but that fund is there to actually support what we are doing so that we can then accelerate and take advantage of the export potential and the foreign exchange earning potential of the hydrogen economy for our country. He did indicate, of course, that we need to learn from how Middle East countries have used their strategic positioning in terms of oil to make sure that they dictate how foreign investors and other people, when they come into the country, how do they play and how do they become part of the new economy that they did. So he was actually giving us a strategic advice here that as South Africa, we also need to have a regulatory framework that begins to look at how do we protect local businesses and local entrepreneurs from foreign investors in a way that we keep the base ownership of this new green field industry in terms of ownership to South Africans. And we heard how the MUM has been explaining to us that whilst we are building this hydrogen economy, it is going to decommission a lot of existing carbon-based and fossil fuel-based energy production firms or factories or generators he did indicate that when we do that, we should know that when you close a power station, you are downstream closing a mine, you are downstream closing local businesses, you are downstream closing livelihoods, you are downstream initiating an elaborate retrenchment process. And that on its own will need a strategic, coordinated process that as we do that, we need to create a repurposing of all those people that are going to be participating in the new hydrogen economy. However, as this is what the speakers have indicated, but as a closing parting shot, I made up what are the strategic issues that have emerged out of today's discussion, because we need to say what are our take homes over and above what we heard from the speakers, and we also taking that home. The first thing is that the hydrogen economy, it's an ownership greenfield. As we speak now, the ownership in this space is still a greenfield. Whatever ownership is existing there, it's purely entrepreneurial zeal and entrepreneurial drive. But there's no industry-wide policies and strategies to deal with the ownership. So it's an ownership greenfield, and we need to make sure that that greenfield, we protect it for South Africans. I think that is the first strategic issue that we need to indicate related to the theme of today's episode. The second one, the hydrogen economy, it's an opportunity for South Africa to start a sustainable and resilient energy future. Whilst we are a fossil fuel-based economy, depending on coal and related, but this is giving us an opportunity to earnestly start a sustainable and resilient energy future that will take us into a competitive country that this can make us. The third is that a strategic issue is that the hydrogen economy will mitigate our current grid reliability challenges. We have a very serious grid reliability challenges as a country. Our energy supply has been choking, or it has choked our capacity to grow as an economy to the potential related to the skills base that we have as an economy. So the energy insecurity and grid unreliability is actually impacting on what our country can be. 4, it is also another strategic issue is that the hydrogen economy is a proven job creator, as it is an industry on its own. We anticipate that it is a job creator downstream where we can start a completely new industry. When you calculate the multiplier impact of that, the jobs that are going to come out of the VAL might create a new migration issue for the VAL urban conurbation. The 5th issue, this hydrogen economy can be a replacement foreign exchange earner for gold. We know that South Africa still is reliant on its minerals, gold, platinum, and others for foreign exchange. But this will be the foreign exchange earner that is at the same time building other skills other than hard labor skills that we have seen in the mining and whatever industries. This is going to actually pull the cognitive capability of South Africa into being a foreign exchange earner and therefore replacing gold. That is a strategic issue that we need to look at when we get into this hydrogen economy. Lastly, and not least, in terms of the strategic issues that are emerging, is that the hydrogen economy will require a strong and capable state coordination. Without a strong and capable coordination, we are going to have false starts, and before we realize it, we will have a dismembered approach into an economy that requires a coordination. And that we must congratulate Indaba in the way it has pulled in the people. It's in inaugural Indaba, where you opened with a premier of a province that is actually hosting the Hydrogen Valley, and you pulled all other people from the executive authority, even from the private sector. If we keep this momentum, we will create the capability of the state within the coordination and district development model prescripts that government is trying to implement. And another issue is that this hydrogen economy is actually a network industry. We must know that whilst it is production facility-based industry, where all the things will happen at the valley, but it also has an advantage of creating a very vibrant distribution industry for what is being produced there. And it has a potential to actually deploy other stranded assets that might be victims of decommissioning non-renewable energy sources. For example, there are methanol value chains that can be used for our liquefied aspects of hydrogen energy. We have liquid nitrogen gas handling facilities that might also assist in the hydrogen, liquefied hydrogen. We have shipping routes that are used to move coal and other things. We can reconvert some of those shipping routes to redeploy them so that they start moving our highly surplus produce of our hydrogen economy products. And we have handling standards and protocols that are in the country, ISO and other standards and protocols. We can repurpose those standards and protocols to start talking about how are we standardizing and are we putting protocols to make sure that the hydrogen energy meets your bylaws and the laws in local government and other places, so that we don't have a policy deficit as we are moving forward. We also need to look at how do we repurpose our training institutions and universities and even your sector education and training agencies to start looking at redeploying people that find themselves in power stations and other places, so that we turn them into deployable assets that must not be stranded. The regulatory regime is another thing that in the network industry is becoming important, because we need to make sure that the local government bylaws, especially of the valve and areas where we are targeting to put this hydrogen valley, their local government bylaws needs to start now being subjected to audits, so that as we audit them so that we don't have a regulatory framework that is going to be an impediment, because it takes time to go through a regulatory cycle. So what are the advantages of what we have done? What we have done now is that we have unlocked a number of strategic infrastructure needs that are going to underpin the hydrogen economy. Some of them is transportation. It's going to be a very big thing. And that transportation, it will be specialized transformation, and therefore is going to draw on the cognitive capability of South Africa that has been underutilized for years. It is going to create infrastructure needs for liquefaction of hydrogen and moving it as a liquid, and we might have completely new infrastructure needs that might have multiplier along the routes. We will have compression needs as we compress a lot of things that are going to be because we need to store it and move it in its stored form, and we need compression technology, and that can unlock a lot of career paths for the youth that is in school and coming through into university. Then we also have need for liquid organic hydrogen carriers, which is a critical thing if you look at all other countries that have that, if you look at Tokyo and other places. Last but not least, we have to congratulate ourselves as a hydrogen Indaba, because the natural policy cycle actually starts the way we are starting. a natural policy cycle. You know, there is policy cycles that are not natural; they are inorganic. You know, people fly overseas, and when they come back, they come with policies. They want the policies to rain on South Africa. No, this one has gone its natural way. Industry players have actually started the debate. The industry players have started the debate, and that debate is informed by entrepreneurial response to the market demands. There is also industry association policy briefs that are emerging. If you look at what the Hydrogen Indaba Consortium and the African Industrialists Association is starting to produce towards informing this policy cycle. Our involvement and invitation of the trade union movement and all other people has created a very strategic social dialogue where we'll have social dialogue outcomes, then there will be sector white papers, and then there will be industry-driven market influence. And that is going to create knowledge translation interfaces, and these knowledge translation interfaces are things like what we have now, and an Indaba will also have seminars, will have a report of this Indaba, and all those are knowledge translation interfaces. I've seen the IDC has produced a lot of material on this matter, and all those knowledge translation interfaces, they create a wisdom that the country can basically draw from and move forward. But once that has happened, it then moves immediately into state and government, where the state will then be in a position to come with a white paper that has industry contribution. Then there'll be legislative framework that deal that. And then the state has already done what we call a development zone designation for that to happen. And the executive oversight was seeing it that our ministers are there. And in that way, there will be social compacting and governance and better industry players. Ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the summary that I have made. And before I close, let me thank the moderator again. He has steered this ship so well, and we are indebted, and thank you. And then thank the speakers for the time that you have made to be with us. The per capita cost of the hours that you have given us are very serious, and we thank you for the contribution to what we are doing. And I would also like to thank Mr. Mashudu and the entire team that is the wind behind the wings of this initiative. Kutama and Jackie, all of them, Veronica and Luleka, all of them, we thank you. And without vitiating, but I want to thank more specifically our sponsors, the Val SEZ. Thank you for sponsoring this episode of today, the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency, the IDC, the PwC, the DBSA, BMW South Africa. And I wish to indicate to you that we have our next discussion next week, Thursday. And next week, Thursday, we will be discussing exactly what NUM and what came out today to show that this thing, they are flowing from one to the other. We'll be discussing skills and development with Minister Blaine Zimande from Department of Science and Technology. We will also be impressing upon him to also speak to the innovation aspects of the hydrogen economy, because if you look at the innovation aspects of the hydrogen economy, the whole hydrogen molecule splitting to get energy and all those things is such a fascinating thing for young minds. We will be hearing him and his team that will be coming there. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us. Now, I don't know whether I'm the one who must declare
I am going to just say a few words before we close the meeting. Just to echo once again, Professor Matebula, I have one announcement that I would like to make, and that is the hydrogen economy in Indaba is your Indaba. So we are asking you, the participants, to contact us, to communicate with us, to share ideas, to share thoughts that you have, that you believe should be incorporated in building the hydrogen economy going forward. So that's really what I wanted to request, that we need your input, we need your ideas. You can write to admin. There is the admin email address. We are busy working on creating an interactive page in our website so you can share ideas and inputs. Once again, many, many thanks, and we will hope to see you in the next episode 3. We have an idea of having an episode 5, which will be in 3rd week of November, addressing the funding challenges that we need to address in building the hydrogen economy. And we're also looking for ideas and input on that as well. Thank you.